Okay, seniors, so the next thing that we're going to be discussing is a review of the bureaucracy. And this will not be the most exciting review, but I do have one surprise in store. So the first thing I want to talk about is this chart that kind of explains and demonstrates to you all the parts of the executive branch of government. So keep in mind, under the direction of the president, the executive branch is in charge of enforcing the laws that are made by the legislative branch. So if we begin up at the executive office of the president, all the parts of the executive office of the president, which help make, for example, the budget, which help keep tabs on the economy, and also the National Security Council is part of this. The president has the ability to appoint the heads to all of these offices and agencies as long as he gets the approval of the Senate. However, the White House office staff, which over time has come to become the most important advisors to the president, do not need any sort of approval by Congress at all. So they really work for the president of the United States, and the president has come to rely on parts of his White House staff, like the press secretary and chief of staff, people like that, to really be the key advisors to guide his policies and decisions.
Hi, schoolers.
That was Grace. The rest of these offices, though, other than the White House staff office, do have to be approved by the Senate. From there, then, we have all of the cabinet agencies listed. So the president not only appoints the head of each of the cabinet departments, but also most of the upper level positions. So in its entirety, he gets to appoint usually between 2,000 to 2,400 people to posts within the executive branch of government when he takes control as president. Now, these independent agencies down here and government corporations, probably the most important examples to know would be the Federal Reserve. He does get to appoint people to head these agencies, but only when their term of service is up. So if, for example, the president came in when the head of the Federal Reserve had been appointed by Obama, when Trump came in, he did not get to appoint a new head of the Federal Reserve. But when the head of the Federal Reserve term was up, then he was able to appoint somebody to that position. And that's just to make sure that these different offices can act somewhat separately from the jurisdiction of the president. So this is the executive branch in its entirety. Of course, the legislative branch and judicial branch don't fall under the executive branch.
Hi, I'm Buddy the guinea pig, and I also live in the O'Neill household. I am a government bureaucrat. So, bureaucrat, you ask, what is it? Well, bureaucracy are all the people, procedures, and regulations that are put in place to implement and carry out a policy. Bureaucracy can sometimes be frustrating because it has these characteristics. First off, all bureaucrats follow standard operating procedure. That means for anything that needs to get done, every bureaucrat is supposed to follow the same rules, the same process, and all the same amount of red tape paperwork. So bureaucracy can move a little slow sometimes. Secondly, it has a hierarchical structure. So when you do want something done, oftentimes the first person you talk to doesn't have the power to do anything. They've got to check with their boss, who has to check with their boss, who has to check with their boss. And this is all in place that people are apparently treated fairly and it makes the government more efficient. Thirdly, bureaucrats are experts in their field. So they are educated on the particular topic for the department that they work for, or they're very well trained in how to do their specific job or task. And that's necessary because, look, the people making the laws can't be experts on everything, so it's up to the people in the agencies and the departments to be the experts. So, to continue, other key aspects or characteristics of bureaucracy are task specialization. For example, my specialty is building and burrowing nice nests with the newspaper that the O'Neills put in my home. But every bureaucrat specializes usually in just one thing. That means they can't handle a problem from start to finish, which is also why sometimes dealing with bureaucracy can be frustrating. Because one person might be helpful, but then they have to pass you on to somebody else to get the next part of the job completed. That's called fragmentation. We're very fragmented, and oftentimes that makes us inefficient. We don't know how to work together, and oftentimes we don't know what the right hand is doing when the left hand is doing something different. We're just not in very good communication with each other. And lastly, you need to make sure you understand what bureaucratic discretion is. You see, the lawmakers, they can't put every single detail in a law, nor will they know what kind of problems and situations we may face when we start to implement a policy or a law. So therefore, they leave it up to the bureaucrats who specialize in these different areas and are experts to sometimes figure out the details of how law will be carried out. That's a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing, and Congress frequently gets a little angry with us when we mess things up. So, what we basically do is we make all the guidelines and the regulations according to the power that Congress gives us. And again, we handle the details and as much power that the Congress will give us. The reason the bureaucracy has grown is because the federal government is a lot more powerful than it ever used to be before. Since the New Deal, there's been more government regulation and more government policies. So the bureaucracy has grown greatly.
Okay, thank you, guinea pigs. As far as types of bureaucratic agencies, I have those defined for you there, but I kind of talked about them in the opening of this review when I went through the chart at the beginning. So you do need to know those. You need to be able to reference them on the AP test. What I'm going to talk about in this section are the checks on bureaucracy, both what the President, Congress, Judiciary can do, as well as acts that we have put in place in the past to ensure that we have a non-corrupt bureaucracy. So let's begin with the president here. The president can appoint the heads of most of the agencies and cabinet departments. And with those independent agencies, when a term is up, he gets to appoint someone to those positions. He also gives executive orders on how policy is supposed to be carried out. So a lot of what those executive orders do is they just give directives to the different agencies and cabinet departments on what to do. He also can recommend their budget. So, and that's a huge influence. This is one case where the president kind of has a power of the purse because he can recommend cuts to different agencies and departments, or he can recommend additional money in the budget when he submits his proposal to Congress. As far as Congress, they still hold the power of the purse, so they appropriate money because they actually have to pass the 12 budget resolutions that give the executive branch the money that they need. They can also pre-write legislation to limit how much administrative discretion would be included. And again, bureaucratic discretion is the ability of the people in these agencies to kind of take matters into their own hand. Not every part of policy or law is spelled out for them, so part of it's left for them to determine. But when Congress writes a bill, they can limit the amount of bureaucratic discretion an agency will have. And then lastly, most importantly, is their oversight ability to be able to call members of the bureaucracy before their various committees to testify about how policy is being carried out, how money is being spent, and possible corruption. And the judiciary, just like they can declare an act of the president unconstitutional, they can declare an act of an agency or cabinet department also unconstitutional. So judicial review, once again, is the most powerful check the judiciary has. As far as other reforms during this time period, we have the Pendleton Civil Service Act, and that was passed in the late 1800s. And this act required that you have to take a civil service test in order to prove that you are worthy, educated enough in the content in which you're about to serve to hold that position. So it basically based your hiring and also your promotions on merit instead of just who you know in government. The Hatch Act is what disqualified bureaucrats from being able to campaign in an election while they are on the job. So they can do something out. Most agencies and cabinet departments, you can campaign and partake in an election outside of office hours, but that is not supposed to at all happen during office hours. An example would be with school levies. We, as the school district and the officials, the teachers, the administrators, cannot be emailing or discussing levy policies and initiatives and encouraging people to vote during our actual work day. That can happen outside of our work day. There are some executive offices that don't allow any campaigning at all, partisanship campaigning at all. An example would be the Central Intelligence Agency. If you are a CIA agent, you are not allowed to campaign or partake in campaign events while you are on the job or in your own free time outside the job. And again, that all was decided by the Hatch Act.